And it is focusing on domestic violence. Inspector Sheridan Hill of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is with us. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you
How
for
have you
having
been?
us. I'm fine.
We talk about domestic violence, but people clearly, in some instances, don't understand what domestic violence is. It's probably not just the physical abusing of somebody. What is the real definition of domestic violence?
So it's a very broad topic that involves a number of issues. I think there is some misunderstanding by the public with respect to the role of the police, the role of the court, the powers of the police, the powers of the court. We are not there with the victims 24/7, the police officers, members of the judiciary. And there's a huge responsibility for the victims, other stakeholders, relatives, close friends, and so on. If they see something, and for members of the public where acts of domestic violence are committed. So quickly, let's get into the definition. According to the Domestic Violence Act, domestic violence includes physical, sexual, emotional, or psychological, or financial abuse committed by a person against a spouse, child, any other person who's a member of the household or dependent. So what is emotional or psychological abuse? Under the Act, it means a pattern of behavior of any kind, the purpose of which is to undermine the emotional or mental well-being of a person, including a whole range of things, and I'll just mention a few. Persistent intimidation by use of abusive or threatening language, persistent following of the person from place to place, depriving that person of the use of his property, the watching or besetting of the place where the person resides, works, carries on business, or happens to be, interfering with or damaging the property of the person, the forced confinement of the person, persistent telephoning of the person at the person's place of residence or work, and making unwelcome and repeated or intimidatory contact with a child or elderly relative of the person. So that's emotional or psychological abuse. Financial abuse means a pattern of behavior of a kind, the purpose of which is to exercise coercive control over or exploit or limit a person's access to financial resources so as to ensure financial dependence. And sexual abuse under the Act includes sexual contact of any kind that is coerced by force or threat of force and the commission of or an attempt to commit any of the offenses listed under the Sexual Offences Act. So that, in a broad sense, is what constitutes domestic violence. And I want to point out here that while you have acts, which is what the public usually believes domestic violence is limited to, acts of physical violence.
Exactly, and normally we think about it as being a spouse, a husband and a wife in that case, but the definition is so broad.
Yeah. Dependents and spouse and person in visit in different types of relationships and so on. So I think it's important for us to understand the full breadth of domestic violence.
So now what is the role of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service? Because many times, many times, you hear that people say they make a report to the police don't come. When they come, they talk to the person for 5 minutes, then they leave, and nothing really happens, and the situation remains as is.
Okay, so I define domestic violence according to the Act, right? Where you have acts of physical and sexual abuse and so on, the police has wide powers to arrest, depending on the nature of the acts and so on, or to prosecute those persons for those acts. Now, that is separate and apart from the interim and protection orders that the victims and the other persons I'm going to mention can apply to the court for. So where we have physical acts of violence, sexual violence, and so on, the police can act independently of your protection order or any interim order made by the court. So the police can act there. So let's get that clear from the outset. The police role is to take a report. You go to the station, you make a report, they enter the report in the station diary, they take a statement and investigate the report. We have clear protocols in the police service regarding domestic violence. In fact, there's a domestic violence register. And something I'll talk about later on. When you go to the court and you get your protection order, your interim order, you go to the police, you walk with your copies. The police role is to serve the protection order. The police keeps a copy of the protection order in a file at the station, but one copy is to be served. That is the role of the police.
So the police.
So that's just one. This is
Right.
part. So part of our function is to serve those protection orders. Because as I will say later on, if the order is not served on the respondent, the person to whom the order is supposed to apply, or the person is not in court when the order is made, then the order is not effective against the individual. People need to understand that too.
Yeah, I think this is a very important and interesting conversation, Inspector, but we have to take a break, but we'll continue the conversation after. All right, this is the Now Morning Show. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing the conversation on domestic violence with Inspector Sheridan Hill of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Inspector Hill, just before the break, you were telling us about the role of the police service in dealing with a situation or report of domestic violence.
Okay, so apart from serving the order and prosecuting persons for domestic violence, you make a report to the police. The police role is to take that report and investigate that report. And when I talk about the different persons who can apply for a protection order, the police is one of the individuals under the Act who can apply for a protection order. So our role is to take a report, investigate your report. And I started to mention a while ago that we have a number of guidelines, protocols in the service for dealing with domestic violence. So at the station level, the SDO in charge of the station must appoint a second division officer to investigate. When he or she investigates, they submit a report. That report moves from the inspector in charge of the SDO in charge of the station to the senior superintendent in charge of the division, who then submits a report to the assistant commissioner in charge of that particular area, and the assistant commissioner then submits a report to the commissioner of police. There's a file, there's a register at station for domestic violence reports that the SDO, the second division officer in charge of that station, is supposed to attend to on a regular basis.
But Inspector, the question is, it sounds like a long process. How long does this actually take? Because as somebody pointed out on social media that in a lot of cases it might be a life or death situation, and because of all of this long process, the police not able to act on time.
Our internal process, that's for us. But treating with your report is a separate issue.
Okay.
A report is received at the station. That report is taken and investigated. It is supposed to be taken and investigated. But I want to say something here about, the people talk about it's life. Sometimes it's life and death, it's life threatening and so on. People have to understand the role of the courts. You go to the court, you get an order. The order could be either an interim order pending the hearing or a protection order. That's the court's role. The judge, the magistrates, and some at magistrate level, the magistrate is not there with you 24/7. When you come to the station and you make a report, our role is to investigate and take the necessary action. We're not with you 24/7. So the Commissioner of Police and the Chief Justice and members of the judiciary, members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we're not bodyguards with those victims 24/7. So there is a responsibility on the persons, the victims. There's a responsibility on the other stakeholders, your friends, your family members who can report something. We also asking persons not to put themselves in harm's way. The other thing I want to mention too is those members of the public who stand by and videotape those acts of domestic violence. When, depending on the situation, they can intervene. They can arrest. They can contact the police. They can contact the police through 999, 555, 482 Gary, your nearest police station. You can do all those things. And I'm not asking members of the public to jump into every situation, but you can assess the situation. And members of the public can act. You see people standing there videotaping with their cell phones and so on.
That is a problem
Instead
that I think many people have.
The first thing they should do is to contact the police And I can tell you now, the police service has evolved. So there are different methods, as I mentioned a while ago. And I can guarantee you, if you contact any one of those numbers, you will get a response quickly. Rather than standing there and watching these women, in most of the cases, and let us also remember that men are
yes,
also victims of domestic violence. And videotaping and sometimes sharing and making these foolish comments rather than doing the responsible thing. So there's that. The police office, the role of the police is also to, where a protection order has been issued, remember we have a copy at the station. So you report breaches, we can act. The police also has a power to enter premises without a warrant where we feel acts of domestic violence are being committed. So that's the role of the police. The role of the police is to take a report, investigate a report where it's acts of physical and sexual violence. Our role in prosecuting those persons is outside or separated apart from the action of the victims and the other parties who can go to the court and apply for an order and so on. But we have to remember that when the court issues the order, it is up to the persons to whom the orders are addressed to comply with the order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that protection order is something that we should have a conversation on at another date. For example, one of the questions might be, so I get the protection order and the person still harassing me, what to do next?
All right, so that means that the person is breaching the order. You report the matter and the police can take action.
Police take action. All right, so it's a conversation that we'll continue to have, domestic violence, a very, very serious conversation and something that we need to have on an ongoing basis. Thank you very much, Inspector Sheridan Hill of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, for joining us this morning, and hopefully you'll join us next week Monday.
Definitely, and I'm sure there are other issues involving domestic violence that we want the public to be aware of.
I agree.
So they're better informed. They know that they can play a critical role in dealing with domestic violence, not just the victims. And we don't want people going out there and videotaping acts of domestic violence rather than contacting the police. Or you sometimes even have a power of arrest to arrest the person who's doing that.
Citizens arrest,
and take that person to the nearest police or the nearest police station rather than standing there and videotaping these things.
Exactly, and these are conversations we will continue to have on the Now Morning Show. For now, though, we take a break and come back.